What do you think made the show scary?
It's funny because you're limited as to how you can scare people on television because you've got standards and practices, the sort of the censors, if you will, and they won't allow you to do certain things like, if you show somebody getting a shot, you can't actually see the needle piercing the skin. And they sort of take some of the tools away from you because some of the scariest things are the most visceral things. But the way you scare people is by showing them as little as possible, keeping things in the shadows. I was given very good advice when I had written the pilot episode, and I showed it to a friend who's a production designer, and he actually just won an Academy Award for Avatar, but he's been Steven Spielberg and Robert Zemeckis' production designer for about 20 years. And he had just done 48 episodes of this show called Amazing Stories. And he gave me very good advice, and that advice was try to show people as little as possible because you're not going to have the time and the money to give them the imagery that you think is going to be scary. And so make it scary by suggesting things, keeping things in the shadows. And that was a really good bit of advice, not only because it does make it more scarier when you suggest things, when you hint at things, but it was a matter of time and money on the X-Files.
So you would say that the limitations of network television actually, in the long run, worked for you in making the show scarier?
The parameters, I think, really helped to create so much of the show's mood.
Let's talk about some of the staff of writers and producers that you hired for the show. Now, initially, did you want to write most of the episodes yourself?
No, I knew I'd have a staff. I just didn't know how good that staff was going to be, and it ended up being, I think, one of the key reasons the show was a success is because people came and contributed brilliance to it.
At the beginning, was it difficult to sort of turn over that process to other people?
In the beginning, I had a process I wrote lengthy outlines, and I was lucky to have two of the writers came in. And they had worked in a different way, which was they worked on a bulletin board with 3x5 cards, and it ended up being the way that we would work through the course or the run of the show. It was called the boarding process, and you would basically put every dramatic beat up on a 3x5 card, and that became the format or approach that you took to building a dramatic story.
Did you do that for individual episodes or for entire seasons at a time?
We would do individual episodes. We had a sort of an idea where we were going, but we really felt our way through the dark a lot of the time.
At the beginning of the season, would you get together and map out how you wanted that season to go, or did it kind of flow organically during the writing process?
There was something that happened during the first season that sort of helped to map out where the show would go through the second and third season, and that was that Gillian Anderson became pregnant. And when we realized that we'd have to deal with her pregnancy, it actually helped to create some of the mythology and gave direction to the show.
Talk about your relationship with Glenn Morgan and James Wong.
Yeah. Glenn Morgan and James Wong came to the show. They were recommended to me by Peter Roth. He had worked with them at Cannell. They took an immediate... It was their having worked on TV shows that really helped us to find our way through the process because they had actually been involved in season-to-season work. And I had worked on a television show, but it actually had been a little while since I had done so. But I had not worked on one that was so demanding. And they really helped to shoulder a lot of the burden. Plus, they were imaginative. They liked the genre. They liked the characters. And they found ways to make the show as creepy and scary as it became.
Was it difficult to find people who are kind of thinking and writing on your wavelength?
In the course of the show, I think that there were 5 or 6 people or writing teams that wrote an episode that didn't need to be rewritten. So there were yeah, it was difficult to find people who connected with the show.
And was the process that they would turn in a script and you would take it and vet it and make changes or suggestions? Or?
There were certain people that you didn't need to touch their scripts, but then there were other people that that went through my computer.
Talk about Frank Spotnitz.
Yeah, Frank Spotnitz was somebody that came onto the show sort of midway through the second season. He was a person that I had met in a book club that I belonged to. He had originally pitched me an episode of The X-Files, a story idea, which I had declined. And but when the writing staff was started disbanding, the original writing staff, people were heading off for other shows and or other work. I called Frank just on the hunch that he was a serious writer that could come in and help us. But he entered as he ended up becoming an executive producer on the show, but he entered as the lowest level of writer.
Talk about R.W. Goodwin.
Yeah, Bob Goodwin was I think one of the reasons that the show was a big success. Bob knew how to create a good crew and a good environment for working. He was a great delegator, and he just made sure that, and this is the thing that Bob really did that made the show a hit, is he was able to convince Fox to spend the money that we needed to make these episodes.
What did he bring to the show as you saw it on the screen?
Bob ended up becoming as a director, he directed the final episode of season 1, and then he would become our sort of bookend director. He would direct the first and final episodes of all the subsequent seasons that were shot in Vancouver.
And did you consider those kind of the most important episodes, the premiere and the finale of each season?
The bookends were very important because we would typically end up with a cliffhanger at the end of a season, so that was an important episode, and the way we came back from that cliffhanger was all important. So he really directed a lot of the mythology episodes.
And in what way did the first season kind of define the series' story arc and mythology? What did you lay down that first season?
If you look at the first 2 episodes, you really sort of get the basis of the mythology arc, and if you look at the last episode, you get a lot of it as well, the science in particular. And that was a result of a friendship that I had with the writer Anne Simon, or I should say the researcher. She's a writer also, but she was our science guru, and she was a virologist at the University of Maryland, and somebody that I knew and who liked the show and really schooled me in what I would call what became the science of the X-Files.
Let's talk a little bit about the show's theme of government conspiracy. Are you yourself a conspiracy theorist as far as government goes? And what was the basic theme there?
I love the idea of a conspiracy. I'm not so sure that I believe that conspiracies are capable of being carried out because I think that there are so many reasons and ways that people spill the beans. But I was a child of Watergate. I was coming of age. Certainly a lot of my, I think, attitudes towards government and towards authority and towards institutions came as a result of my being, I think, a high school senior when Watergate developed.
Was there sort of any objection to your having, cast aspersions on the United States government from the network or critics? Or
very early on, I remember that this is something that scared me. The FBI, who I said had been helpful to an extent on the pilot by giving us some background information about how the FBI works, the FBI called about a week or 2 before the pilot aired, and they said, "Who are you and what are you doing?" And I thought this is the sort of long arm of the law coming down to, spoil our good fun. And so that was something that surprised me, but it also showed me that we were making somewhat of a splash.
Did you hear from FBI agents?
They became unofficially fans of the show, and they became very helpful after that. We were actually invited to the FBI at the end of the first season, so we got a what they called the Jodie Foster tour, and we got to shoot at the firing range and things like that.
Was that important to you to kind of get that stamp of approval?
It was. I mean, to get the FBI sort of, going unofficially on or off the record about their love of the show led me to believe that maybe we were closer to reality than I knew.
How did the storyline of Mulder's sister fit into the show in the first few seasons?
Through 7 seasons, we really explored the disappearance of Mulder's sister and what the truth was about the government conspiracy that ultimately connected to not just the X-Files, but to Mulder's life personally when his sister was abducted when he was 12 and she was 8, as Mulder says in the pilot episode.
And how was that important to his character?
It's important that the X-Files is personalized for Mulder. It's not just an area of investigation. It is an area of very personal investigation for him that ultimately will involve his mother, his father, and his sister.
So without the murder or the disappearance of the sister, there's no show or no motivation for him?
I think the X-Files would have been much drier if there had not been a personal stake in it for Mulder.
Talk about the cigarette-smoking man. How'd you come up with him? What was the process on that?
I just wanted this shadowy figure that stood in the background and never spoke, and represented the shadowy government, the conspiracy. You never knew what his affiliation was. He was just there to look on grimly. It was Morgan and Wong, the writers, that first actually put words in his mouth, and luckily he could act, and so he ended up becoming an all-important. He was the devil in this series.
Did you realize when he was first introduced that he would become such an important character?
I didn't. I mean, I knew he was going to be an important character. I didn't know how important he would ultimately become.
How would you describe him?
I would describe him as dour, as grim. I think Morgan and Wong did an episode that I love that showed him as a destroyer, not a creator, a person who had aspirations to creativity, but they were stifled, or he wasn't good enough, and so he became an evil man.
You mentioned a few minutes ago Watergate. Talk about Deep Throat in the first season. How did he fit into the series?
Well, I mean, I just loved that character played by Hal Holbrook in All the President's Men, and so I wanted to have a character like that, a person who appeared in the shadows and led Mulder by making these kind of insinuations about the government that he was a part of, and giving Mulder just enough to follow the money, if you will.
Why did you kill him off?
I killed him off because it made perfect sense to do it when we did it, and we also found out that there could be, if Deep Throat died, there were other Deep Throats to come out, and Stephen Williams, who played X, became the new Deep Throat.
Who were the Lone Gunmen?
Lone Gunmen are 3 characters created also by Glenn Morgan and James Wong for an episode called EBE, and they were inspired by these people that you meet when you go to fan conventions that have to do with aliens and extraterrestrials and science fiction. You'll meet characters like the Lone Gunmen.
What was their role in the series?
It's funny because I think originally they functioned as comic relief, but what they became in the series was they became the explainers of science. They actually had a big role in a lot of the exposition of the mythology episodes.
So they would have been fans of the X-Files TV show.
I think that they probably would have been fans, but because they were discriminating characters, they probably would have been our biggest critics.
So, were they, in a way, a commentary on the hardest core fans of the series?
Possibly, but I think that they were very fringy.
A lot of critics have pointed out that your show in particular really blended chilling moments and the silly moments. And someone said that you understood the connection between fear and the funny bone. Why do you think humor mixes so well with sci-fi on the series?
I think humor releases tension, and so in the thriller genre, you can release tension through character and through character comedy. But our comedy episode, I think there was always light comedy in every episode because it was the nature of Mulder and Scully's relationship with one another. But I think that the comedic episodes, particularly the ones done by Darren Morgan, were brilliant comedies in their own right. So while you had light comedy throughout the series, the comedic episodes were, I think, some of the most memorable episodes we've ever done.
Did you know at the beginning that the series would evolve into having as many comedic moments and episodes that it eventually did have?
I didn't understand what the range of the show could be or was until I think the second season and into the third season. I think when you look at shows like Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose, when you look at episodes like Home or Squeeze or War of the Copperphages, you see that, or Humbug, that you see that the range of not just the stories you tell, but the range of of the actors and of their comedic ability was great.
Talk a little bit more about Gillian Anderson's pregnancy in season 2. When you first found out about it, what were the problems that you foresaw?
Of course, I foresaw the problem of having to shoot around her pregnancy because she was going to become, a bigger version of herself. But we actually had to figure out a way to write her out of the show for a time because she was going to go off and have that child. And I think that there was a considerable amount of thought put into how to approach it in terms of storytelling. And
were you worried at the beginning that it would hurt the series?
I was concerned that it would hurt the series, and I remember one network executive say, "We're going to have to recast," but I knew that was not going to happen, and nor should it happen. We ended up using it a problem as a benefit.
Talk about the decision to have Scully abducted in season 2.
Yeah, that really came as a result of her pregnancy, and it also helped to, I think, fuel the storyline for the mythology arc, because now with Scully's abduction, we had a very personal stake in finding the truth for her.
How did the Mulder-Scully relationship change in the second season?
It changed because of Scully's abduction. It changed. It's funny. I remember an episode, Red Museum, where they're sitting in a restaurant eating barbecued ribs together, and wearing bibs, and that became an instant fan favorite because they actually are chummy in a way that they weren't quite before. It really was a warming up of their relationship.
Talk about the introduction of Alex and how he fit into the series.
Krycek. Alex Krycek was introduced by Howard Gordon in an episode, I believe it was an episode called Sleepless. He was going to become a foil for Mulder and Scully, a person who was always a sort of a bit of a rat, played beautifully by Nick Lee. He would figure into that two-part abduction. Dwayne Barry and Ascension were the two episodes, figured largely in that, and we would sort of see his stripes there.
You got an Emmy nomination for Dwayne Barry. What was that episode about?
Dwayne Barry was about a man who believed he'd been abducted by aliens, and who ended up going sort of crazy, and Mulder gives himself up as a hostage to try to convince the man to let his other hostages go. It ended up being the first of two parts that dealt with Scully's abduction.
You directed that one, correct?
Yes.
Talk about that experience.
It was my first directing assignment. I gave it to myself, so it was very easy to do. It was. I remember that I'd gone onto the set. I thought I knew what I was doing. I'd gone onto the set and watched Rob Bowman, who's one of the best directors I know, direct the episode Sleepless, which was the one just before Duane Barry. And I was watching him, and I realized I didn't know what he was doing. And I watched him block a scene and camera block a scene. And it was so complicated that I actually became scared. I remember I went to the director, David Nutter, who had directed so many good episodes of the series, particularly in the first year, and asked him if he would help me block a series of scenes, show me how he blocked. And so I think he ended up blocking, roughly a half dozen scenes for me. And I used his camera blocking because it was a good way to, first of all, to use a resource, but it was also a good way for me to sort of see how it is you get the work done in the time allotted and how you do it as beautifully as those more experienced directors were doing.
Talk about the Monster of the Week episodes. How were they compared to mythology or arc episodes?
I think that the show benefited from the release from the mythology that the Monster of the Week episodes gave you. It was a larger palette to work on. I think about working on a show like Lost, which is all mythology, or a show like 24, which is all mythology. And I think that those shows, while they are great, if you stumble early on in the process, in other words, if you don't get good ratings early on, it's very, I think, hard to pick up viewership later on because everything builds on itself.
Explain the alien mythology of the series.
The alien mythology of the series is really the belief Mulder has that his sister was abducted by extraterrestrials when he was a kid, and that there is a government conspiracy to hide the truth and existence of that those abduction events from the public.
So how was, in those first 4 seasons or so, how did X-Files kind of change the landscape of television? Did you see any influence? Or
I think we did certain things. The show actually had a look and a style that was different from what was on television. It was not bright. It was not sunny. It was not. It was lit for effect and to scare you. It was. I think it pushed the limits of what you could do visually on television, both in filmic approach and in production design. So I think that those were things we tried to do. We tried to give everyone credit. We gave credit up front to the production designer and the cinematographer, and that was something that people weren't doing before then. I think that those credits were left at the end of the show. So we were trying to single out the people who had given the show its signature look.
So you would say it was maybe one of the first shows to put an importance on cinematography and look and effects.
I want to say that we were, but there were other shows that aspired to. NYPD Blue came on and they did the shaky cam, and so style became all important. But before that, I think that speed was critical, and that lighting was bright because television's a small box. And I think that the bigger the TV got, the bigger the box got, and the more latitude you had.
When you were writing a given episode, would you kind of have the visual effects and cinematography in mind? And did you ever sort of have to limit yourself because of budgetary and time constraints, as you mentioned?
There were limitations imposed by money and by time. You have these air dates, which are fixed deadlines, and if your effects weren't done before the deadline, of course, you were out of luck. So it was a budgetary thing, but if you read the scripts, they are very visual. We really pointed out what we wanted to see and when we wanted to see it. Delivery of information was all important, and what was kept in the shadows was all important. And so a lot of that direction was given in the script process.
And how close would your vision, when you were writing it, be to the final product?
I have to say that with the people that we had on the show, Graham Murray was a fantastic production designer. They always actually added to, I felt, what was in the script.
So it became better than you had envisioned it?
I think the process, the collaborative process that it is, always made it better.
At what point did you realize the cult following that X-Files had gained?
I think we were one of the first shows, if not the first show, to develop an internet following, and so we had immediate feedback. At 10 o'clock every Friday night, there would be chat rooms that would light up, and we would get a real sense of how the episodes were playing and what the people liked and what
Would
they didn't
you
like.
be waiting for those at your computer screen? Would they just kind of filter through to you through the week?
I think all of us sort of had our online experiences and took different things from that experience.
Do you think that the growth of the internet helped the show ratings-wise or popularity-wise?
I think that it developed, it had an impact on the show because being a cult show, and having a core audience, you really can see how you're reaching them and what they're responding to. And even though I have to say that we never really took suggestions from them, we heard them loud and clear every episode.
Yeah, how much attention did you pay to what fans were saying in forums about the show?
I paid a lot of attention, and I paid a lot of attention to all the written letters I got as well. And I mentioned that early on I got a letter from somebody who said that the episodes were best when they were personal. And so I actually named a character after the person who had written me that letter.
Can you talk about shippers or relationshippers?
Yeah, there's a whole group of people that were fans of the Mulder and Scully relationship, the sexual tension that was created, and they believed that Mulder and Scully were in love. And I always said that the secret to the show is that Mulder loves Scully and Scully loves Mulder, but that was never realized until much later on when that was expressed. I think the first time Mulder and Scully kissed was under the mistletoe in season 6 in an episode I think called Millennium.
What about No Romos?
There were people that were actually against there ever being a romance as well.
So you yourself would be a No Romo?
I believe that I believe they had a romantic relationship. It just was one that was unfulfilled.
So you felt it was better and more interesting to keep it unfulfilled.
I remember when Moonlighting, put the characters together, and it was sort of the end of that series. I mean, that you really, when you put them together, everything changes. Now all of a sudden, there would be hurt feelings, or there would be awkward silences. There would be, all those things that you could play, but I think that they would have a limited value.
And was there a point where you thought that it officially took a turn into romantic territory?
I think not truly until the movie, which almost consummated in a kiss, and the second movie, which ultimately put them in bed together.
Did you ever consider having them end up with other people?
I think early on we had an episode where Scully was dating somebody else. I think it was episode 3 or 4 of the series, and we never ever played anything past that.
How did the apparent death of Mulder at the end of season 2 help bring attention to the series?
it showed that we would go to the ultimate dramatic lengths to make the series interesting and to keep the fans on the edge.
Move on to season 4. How did you decide to give Scully cancer?
That was an unpopular thing to do, and people thought we were going too far. But it actually played into the mythology in a beautiful way, because the healing of her cancer then became a question of, was it natural, was it due to her abduction and or the effects of the of her alien abduction? Was the cancer a result of it, and was the cure of it a result of her involvement in the mythology, if you will?
And how did it change the Scully-Mulder relationship?
All those episodes, beginning with the second season, Dwayne Barry and Ascension, deepened their relationship because it deepened the personal stories for each of them.
And how did it change her beliefs?
It's funny, in season 5, Scully actually becomes the believer and Mulder becomes the skeptic. He sort of loses faith in the conspiracy, and she gains faith as a result of her experiences.
And talk about Gillian Anderson's work during that storyline, for which she got an Emmy.
Yeah, it was there was an episode called Memento Mori, and I remember that it's a very moody and atmospheric and elegiac story, and the script was sort of written right before Christmas, and I remember taking that script with me on Christmas vacation and working on it, and that ended up getting not just Gillian Anderson an Emmy, but it gave the core writers on the show at the time, which were Frank Spotnitz, Vince Gilligan, John Scheiben, and me, an Emmy nomination as well.
Talk about the season finale that year, Gethsemane. You touched on this a little bit, but why did Mulder's beliefs take such a turn at that time?
It's funny, David had recommended to me something that ended up playing into that episode and that mini arc within the arc, which was the Grand Inquisitor and the Brothers Karamazov. And so Deep Throat became the Grand Inquisitor.
Talk about the postmodern Prometheus. What was the premise of that episode? How did you come up with it?
That episode came to me as a result of my friendship with Ann Simon, our science guru, our sort of science advisor on the show, our main one, I should say. And she had done work as an undergraduate with a man who was working with the Drosophila fly, and I ended up going to visit him at the University of Indiana. And it was his science where he was actually changing, using the sort of different genes in the Drosophila fly. He was able to grow legs out of eyes and crazy things, and I sort of took that science and applied it to the Frankenstein story that the postmodern Prometheus is the title is in reference to. And we had actually had a kid who had worked on the movie. So season 5 was filmed just after the filming of the movie, and it would lead up to the movie. And we had a kid who worked on the show who I knew this kid had a look that just sparked something for me, and so I ended up casting these characters who looked like he had a mane like a horse. I had a character who looked sort of like a billy goat with a little scruff. I had all of these sort of Frankenstein characters that I was able to write the entire show around. It was filmed in black and white, so it had a Frankenstein feel to it, like a James Whale Frankenstein story. But for me, that episode really you could only have done that on the strength of the 4 seasons that came before it. You know, it was such an unlikely episode that begins with a comic book page and ends with a comic book page being turned. It's one of my favorite episodes because of a final image that has Mulder and Scully in each other's arms dancing at the end.
In what way you said it could only have been produced later on? Was it the sort of goodwill and trust of the audience that allowed you to do it? Or?
You had the goodwill and trust of the audience. You had the goodwill and trust of the studio and the network. And you actually, I mean, we had the trust of and appreciation of the Academy as well. That episode was nominated for a directing Emmy.
Just to digress for a second, how important was that recognition, all the awards for you guys?
I think it was really big for us. We had won 3 Golden Globes for Best Series, Dramatic Series, and we were nominated for 3 or 4 for Emmys for the same thing. We never won an Emmy for Best Show. But that kind of recognition, I think, really helped to put us on the map as not just a cult show, but as a sort of mainstream cult show.
One more question about the Postmodern Prometheus. How did Cher play a part in the writing of the script?
Cher was a big fan of the show, as was Roseanne Barr, and both of them said that they would like to do an episode. So when I came to write that episode, I wrote both Cher in and Roseanne Barr in, and those were going to be my sort of stunt casting. That was my plan. It ended up that neither of them could do the episode, and so I had to do a Cher imposter and someone who had to stand in for Roseanne in that part. But I actually think that the episode probably worked better with these other actors because I think those characters may have taken away the believability, if there is believability there.
Talk about the finale of season 5 and how you tied it into the feature film.
You know, it's funny because I can't remember what the finale of season 5 was, but we had to film the first movie during the summer, basically during our summer vacation, and then come back and film an entire year of the series that would lead up to the premiere of the movie the following summer. So it was kind of a trick to be able to...
Was that difficult?
It was very difficult to do. So, but it had its benefits as well because you could actually tailor it so that everything worked up to the opening of that movie. And I remember what we had done in the series then was we had really turned everything on its head. We had made Scully the believer and Mulder the skeptic, and that's the way we ended up, and that's the way we finished our season in season 5 right before the movie.
Why was that decision made to do the feature film?
I think David wanted to do a feature film, and we had talked about doing it, and it just became a sort of a natural that we always said we were making a little movie each week, so we wanted the chance to make a big movie.
So you felt like it flowed pretty well from the TV screen to the movie screen that summer?
I felt that it did, and I think that Rob Bowman, who was one of our go-to guys, go-to directors on the series, did a fantastic visual job on that movie.
Now, how did the events in the movie impact the series the following season, season 6?
It just so happened that season 6 was going to become the first season we'd shot in Los Angeles. So we had moved from Vancouver, and everyone said the show was going to be, too sunny and too bright, and it was going to take a lot of the scare out of it. But in the end, I think it actually helped the series because we had new locations to shoot, new places to go, and new storylines to mine. So I think it was probably, even though we hated to leave Vancouver and we hated to leave that crew, which was, I'd call it an all-star crew, we had to, it forced us to become more creative.
Just talk a little bit about you touched on before, the kiss between Mulder and Scully. Was that something that came about organically, or were you kind of feeling some pressure from the shippers to finally show something, and what better place to show it than in the movies?
Well, it's funny. I mean, we showed a near kiss on the movie, but we didn't show a real kiss until season 6. The idea that you could actually, with characters jumping into bed, at the drop of a hat in most series, that you could actually put so much weight and significance on what would be a peck on the lips was really, I think, showed how much sexual tension there was there.
Why was the decision made to move the show for the 6th season? What was the reason behind it?
I think we had, both David and Jillian were living far from home. We'd basically been shooting abroad for 5 seasons, and I think that they wanted to be nearer to their lives back in Los Angeles. And it was something that really came as a result, I think, a result mostly of David saying that he wanted to move the show back.
And you said it benefited you in the long run, but in what ways did it actually change the look and feel of the show, or did it?
You didn't get that the grayness that Vancouver gives you so much of the year. As I say, the crew was, we had fine-tuned the crew. It was Vancouver just has so many different, it has farmland, it has forest, it has urban environment.
You felt you were more
rural.
limited in Los Angeles?
It was just a different place to be, and we did an episode on the Queen Mary that we never would have been able to do in Vancouver. But in Vancouver, we did an episode on a ship that was about to be sunk and made into an artificial reef. So every place has its resources, and it's the job of the producers to try to figure out how to turn that into gold.
I guess in season 6 there were some internet rumblings that some fans may have been alienated by the more humorous or romantic episodes. What is your take on that season?
I think what happened is that after season 3, that there was a tendency to make the standalone episodes lighter episodes and take a lighter approach to them. And so I think sometimes we would go for comedy rather than scare, and we would go for silliness rather than the sort of tension-filled episodes.
And did you like going for, at that point in the series, it felt organic to go for the more funny aspect than scary at that point?
It was just the way that it happened, and it was just I think also a feature of the people who were working on the show at the time. Vince Gilligan, who has got a wonderful light touch, has got a real way with comedy, was responsible for a lot of the standalone episodes at that point. And there are episodes like Bad Blood that are, they're classic episodes, but they're light.
How did you come to hire Vince Gilligan?
I was lucky enough to have been listening when a friend of mine, Paul Brickman, who is famous for having written and directed Risky Business, told me that he had read a script that was so idiosyncratic and brilliant that I had to read it. And I read one of Vince Gilligan's original works, which was called Wilder Napalm, actually made into a movie. So I became very familiar with Vince. I found out later on that Vince was a fan of the show. We invited him to write an episode, and then we invited him onto the show.
What made him such a great fit?
He understood the characters. He loved the characters. He loved the show, and so it was something that while the relationship developed from, what I did is I invited Vince up for the filming of the episode that he had written, and I think that it was being a part of the process that really helped to make him a part of the team.
I want to talk a little bit about filming in Area 51 in season 6.
Yeah.
How was that?
Well, we didn't actually go to Area 51.
Oh, you didn't?
No,
Okay.
we pretended that we went to Area 51. No, they won't allow you to go there.
Really? So it was it was somewhere in Southern California.
Yes.
Talk about the elimination of the syndicate during that season. Why did you decide to do that?
I think ultimately we would resolve Scully's and Mulder's storylines and the search for Mulder's sister in season 7. So we felt that we had sort of taken the audience through enough of that arc, and we put a shift on that arc, and we turned it into something else. And so that was really it was feeling that the arc had run its course at that point.
And after that, what was the new mythology that you introduced?
We had these super soldiers, which were hinted at in early episodes. The idea that you could, through the hybridization of aliens and humans, create an indestructible soldier.
Moving on to season 7, you had both your leads write and direct episodes. How was it working with them in that capacity?
It was always interesting because here are two people who have had more experience on set than most actors can ever get in a lifetime, and so they had a familiarity with the process. So it wasn't hard for them to step back behind the camera. But what was hard was that you're pulling triple duty there. They both wrote the episodes and acted in them and directed them. So it was a lot to ask of them. What was that?
I was just going to ask something I forgot. Talk about the closure of the Mulder sister storyline in season 7.
It was bittersweet for us to close a storyline because it really had been the ship that we set sail on was launched by this storyline. But in resolving it, I think we brought closure to something that was in not desperate need, but in need of some sort of resolution.
Was it sort of an organic thing to end that, or did you feel like it was just overdue and you wanted to move on?
Many things were happening during that time, and David was leaving the show not long after that. We were adding 2 new characters, John Doggett and Monica Reyes. So the show was actually taking on a different color, and we were adding new possibilities in terms of storylines. So I think that everything was changing at that point, and I think that if you look at seasons 7, 8, and 9, they are really interesting in their own right, but they are not necessarily exactly the X-Files of old.
Talk about the finale of season 7. Did you feel like that would have been a good ending to the series?
You probably could have ended it there, but we knew we were going on, so we didn't make an attempt to make that a natural end. I'm so glad that we didn't, because I think so much of the good work done in seasons 8 and 9 came as the result of once again being forced to deal with other circumstances.
What was the thinking of having Mulder get abducted and Scully become pregnant?
We wanted to create or cement a bond between them that was that led to the birth of this character William, who would be we would hint that it was their love child, but it was a way to bring those characters back together and to actually make more of the mythology arc than we had made of it to that point.
What was the reason that David Duchovny did not return after season 7?
I think that it is so much work. It is so much hard work doing a television series, and by that point we were approaching 175 episodes out of the 202 we would ultimately do. And I think that there was a little bit of burnout, and he had been offered movie parts, and I think he wanted to go do an Ivan Reitman movie. So it was really a matter of, I think, life intruding.
At the time when you first learned of it, were you worried about its impact on the show?
It's funny because I was concerned that the show would be changing, but as I always did, I tried to turn a problem into a virtue.
And what steps did you take to do that?
Trying to cast interesting characters who were as unlike Mulder and Scully as possible.
What did you think of the dynamic between Doggett and Scully?
I loved it because Doggett was he was so hard-nosed, but he was fair. He was the opposite of Mulder. He was actually sort of more to the right. He was to the right of Scully and much more to the right than Mulder would ever be. So you had a sort of by-the-books tough guy, and we sort of modeled him on the character in we modeled him on a character named Bud White in the movie, which is escaping me right now. Anyway, can we start this one again? Okay, from the movie L.A. Confidential, there was a character named Bud White, played by Russell Crowe, and we really modeled John Doggett on his character.
How was the dynamic between Robert Patrick and Gillian Anderson?
It was great. I mean, she basically literally throws water in his face the first time she meets him. So we sort of set that off with a bang.
Why did you bring Annabeth Gish to the cast?
We knew we needed to add, if we're going to add a male character, we needed to add a female character as well. And we wanted somebody who was, unlike Scully, who was a skeptic, to be a believer, a sort of character who was open to anything.
And what did she specifically bring to the series?
She brought an intelligence. I think she brought a beauty. She brought. We played that dynamic between her and Doggett. It was counterpoint to Mulder and Scully. Doggett being much more Scully-like and Reyes being much more Mulder-like. So we really sort of mixed it up in direct opposition.
Were there any season 7 episodes that you particularly remember or were fond of?
I can't remember now because seasons 7, 8, and 9 sort of all blend together for me. So I remember an episode where we had, well, it's funny, I can't remember if it's season 7 or 8 now.
Well, if any of those 3 seasons
that's fine.
Stand out.
I think that there's an episode in season 9 that, once again, like episodes like Postmodern Prometheus or Triangle, there's an episode in season 9 that we only got to do based on the goodwill and faith of the studio and network, which was called Improbable. And I wrote this episode that really was... It was so far out. It had little musical numbers in it, and it had Burt Reynolds playing God.
Before you started season 9, there were rumors and speculation that you might not return. What made you ultimately decide to go back for another season?
Personally, I was asked to go back by, even though my contract was up, I was asked to go back by the head of the studio at that point. So I had that impetus personally. But we were still a hit show. We still had the ratings. And I think it was only decided in season 9, which was a very strange season because we premiered late and we premiered not long after the events that would become 9/11. So the mood of the country had changed, and I think the mood of the television viewing audience had changed.
When you were going in, did you realize that would probably be the last season?
I didn't know that. I knew I had signed on for one more season. It could have been my last season, but nobody knew that it was going to be the last one.
And how did the 9/11 attacks change that year?
I just think everything changed. There was this while there was suspicion of government before that, there was complete faith that the government could protect us. And there was a change in attitude, I think, that really put the X-Files in another light.
And was that light to the series' detriment?
I think ultimately it was. I think that just a combination of things, including that, just put a damper on the viewing audience. It's funny that a show like 24 would become popular
Right.
not long after that, and a show like The X-Files, which cast the government in a villainous light, 24 would cast it in a heroic light.
Right, because suddenly government conspiracy becomes not so fun.
That's right.
Right. Why did you decide to kill the lone gunman in the Jump the Shark episode?
Because, of course, Jump the Shark is a reference to when a show has gone too far, it jumps the shark, I think, which is a reference to Happy Days. The Lone Gunmen had their own spin-off series that we developed, and when that series was canceled, we decided to ultimately do The Lone Gunmen in, because we knew we were going to go off the air.
Talk about the final episode of the X-Files. Did you tie up loose ends? Did you leave things unanswered?
We knew that there's a possibility we would come back and do another movie, so we wanted to leave it open in a way with Mulder and Scully, as I say, riding off into the sunset, not knowing what happened to them, but knowing that they were together. I think it was a chance to satisfy the audience by wrapping up certain aspects of the mythology, the larger mythology, and it was done as the only time we ever did a 2-hour episode. It was it was a little movie in itself.
Mm-hmm. How was it received?
I think that by that point our ratings had dipped a little bit, but I think that that boosted our ratings for the series ender.
Were you personally happy with the episode?
I am happy with the episode. There was something I wanted to do with it that ultimately I was talked out of, but that was to do the first part of the episode where Mulder, it's actually all in Mulder's mind. What would his imagining what would happen if the X-Files had turned out in a different way? And so it would have been a dream sequence for the first hour and something else for the second hour, but I was talked out of that.
And so you're happy with it? If you could go back, you would not do anything differently?
It's hard to say that you would do anything differently. It's what I decided to do, so I'm living with it.
We touched on a little bit of this with Twilight Zone, but were there other classic sci-fi shows and movies that you were influenced by?
The Outer Limits was something I watched, loved as a kid. Night Gallery, the Rod Serling series. Twilight Zone is a younger kid. Those Kolchak movies, I remember. I remember watching Frankenstein, Creature from the Black Lagoon. These were all things that I would see as a kid and would leave an influence on me.
We'll take a break.